Detachment is not coldness. It's control. Let's clear something up right away. You don't suffer because you care. You suffer because you're attached. Attached to how someone treats you. Attached to what they might do next. Attached to the hope that things will change if you just wait, explain, or give a little more. And that attachment quietly takes control of your mind. You replay conversations. You read into small signals. Your mood rises and falls based on someone else's behavior. That's not love. That's loss of inner control. Stoicism never taught people to stop feeling. It taught them to stop being ruled by feeling. Emotional detachment, in the Stoic sense, is not about becoming cold, distant, or cruel. It's about reclaiming ownership of your inner state. Because the moment someone else can dictate how you feel, they hold power over you, and most of the time, they don't even know it. This is why emotional detachment feels so difficult. Not because it's wrong, but because it threatens a habit your mind has grown dependent on. The habit of seeking reassurance, the habit of hoping for closure, the habit of waiting for someone else to act in a way that finally gives you peace. Stoicism cuts through that illusion. It teaches a harder but freer truth. You don't need someone to change for you to be calm. You need to change how much access they have to your emotions. In this video, you'll learn how to emotionally detach from someone using Stoic principles, without disappearing, without playing games, and without shutting your heart down. This is about learning how to care without clinging, how to feel without losing clarity, how to stay grounded even when attachment pulls at you. If you've been stuck in a loop of thinking about someone who no longer deserves that space in your mind, stay with me. And before we begin, leave this in the comments, not for motivation, but for discipline. I feel, but I do not cling. Let's begin. 1. Understand what attachment really is. Before you can emotionally detach from someone, you need to understand what attachment actually is. Because most people misunderstand it. They think attachment means love, care, connection. Stoicism sees it differently. Attachment is not about how deeply you feel. It's about how much control you've handed over. When you're attached, your emotional state depends on things you do not control. Their tone, their attention, their availability, their approval. That's why attachment hurts. Not because the other person is necessarily cruel, but because your peace is outsourced. Notice the pattern. You feel calm when they are warm, anxious when they pull away, hopeful when they reach out, unsettled when they go quiet. That emotional instability is not love, it is dependency. The Stoics were very clear about this distinction. You can care deeply about someone without needing them to behave a certain way for you to be okay. Attachment begins the moment you say silently, "I will be at peace when they change." That thought is the trap, because now your mind is waiting, monitoring, interpreting every signal. You're no longer living in the present, you are managing hope, and hope, when it depends on another person's behavior, becomes a form of suffering. This is why attachment is exhausting. Your mind is constantly negotiating with reality. Stoicism does not ask you to stop caring. It asks you to stop binding your inner state to external behavior. Here is the brutal Stoic insight. You are not attached to the person. You're attached to the expectation that they will show up differently, that they will finally understand, that things will return to how they once felt. As long as that expectation exists, detachment is impossible, because you are still invested in an outcome. Stoicism teaches you to separate three things most people confuse: care, expectation, control. You can care without expectation. You can observe without trying to control. You can feel without obeying the feeling. That separation is freedom. Make this practical. Ask yourself one honest question. What am I hoping they will do so I can feel okay? The answer reveals the attachment. Not the person, not the situation, the hope. Stoicism does not shame you for having it. It teaches you not to build your inner peace on it. Hold on to this principle as we continue. I allow myself to feel, but I do not require others to behave a certain way for my peace. Once you understand this, detachment no longer feels like loss. It begins to feel like clarity, because you are no longer fighting reality. You are stepping out of its grip. 2. Stop negotiating with your emotions. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to emotionally detach is negotiating with their emotions. They don't observe them, they argue with them. They say things like, "Just one more conversation. I just need closure. If I explain myself better, I'll finally feel calm." This is not healing, this is bargaining. Stoicism is very clear about this. Emotions are experiences, not advisors. When you try to reason with an emotion, you strengthen it. Every time you replay a conversation in your head, you are not finding clarity. You are feeding attachment, because the emotion isn't asking to be understood. It's asking to be obeyed. And obedience is what keeps you trapped. Stoics never tried to eliminate emotion. They trained themselves to not follow it blindly. Epictetus warned that the moment you feel a strong emotional pull, that is the exact moment discipline is required. Not suppression, not indulgence, observation. Here is where most people fail. They notice the emotion, but then immediately act on it. They text, they check, they explain, they seek reassurance. That action teaches the mind a dangerous lesson. When I feel discomfort, I must do something to make it stop. This creates dependency, because now your mind associates peace with reaction. Stoicism breaks this cycle by removing negotiation entirely. You do not ask the emotion what it wants. You do not promise it relief. You do not try to convince it to leave. You let it exist without obeying it. That is detachment. Here is the Stoic shift you must internalize. Feeling an emotion does not require taking action. Sadness does not require contact. Anxiety does not require reassurance. Longing does not require explanation. Emotions rise. Emotions peak. Emotions fall. They always do, if you stop interfering. The reason detachment feels impossible is because you keep interrupting the process. You try to fix the feeling instead of letting it pass. Stoicism asks you to tolerate discomfort without negotiating. That tolerance is strength. A simple Stoic practice. When the urge appears, to text, to check, to explain, do nothing for 10 minutes. Not to resist forever, just to delay. During that delay, observe the emotion like weather. This is longing. This is anxiety. This is fear of loss. Label it. Do not judge it. Do not act on it. Most urges collapse when they are not rewarded, not because you fought them, but because you stopped feeding them. This is the core rule of emotional detachment. You do not need to resolve every feeling. You need to outlast it. Once you stop negotiating with your emotions, they lose authority. They still appear, but they no longer decide. And that is the beginning of real freedom. 3. Withdraw emotional investment. First, not physical contact. Most people think emotional detachment means disappearing, blocking, ghosting, cutting all contact overnight. Stoicism does not start there, because physical distance without emotional distance still keeps you attached. You can stop talking to someone and still carry them everywhere in your mind. That is not detachment. That is avoidance. Stoic detachment begins internally. Before you reduce contact, you reduce investment. Investment is not time alone. It is imagination. It is the future you keep rehearsing, the conversations you replay, the meaning you assign to every small action. That is where attachment actually lives. This is why detachment feels difficult even when the other person is absent. you are still meeting them in your thoughts. Stoicism addresses this directly. You cannot detach while you are still, imagining different outcomes, waiting for messages that may never come. Interpreting silence as meaning, assigning emotional weight to neutral behavior. These habits keep emotional capital invested. And where capital is invested, attention follows. Stoic practice begins by withdrawing that capital, not dramatically, not aggressively, quietly. Here is the shift you must make. Stop living in their potential. Start observing their reality. Potential is emotional debt. Reality is information. When you catch yourself imagining, what if they change? What if I say it differently? What if this means something? You interrupt the thought. Not with force, with clarity. You remind yourself, they act, I interpret. My interpretation is optional. This is not cold, it is accurate. Stoicism teaches that suffering often comes from adding meaning where none is required. You don't detach by disappearing. You detach by stopping unnecessary meaning-making. Another critical step: stop rehearsing conversations in your head. Those conversations are not preparation, they are emotional reinforcement. Every imaginary dialogue keeps the bond alive. Stoics treat this as training the mind, not indulging it. When the rehearsal begins, you return to the present, your breath, your posture, your immediate task. This is not distraction, this is discipline. As emotional investment decreases, something shifts. You still feel, but the feeling is no longer consuming. You still care, but the care is no longer demanding. This is when physical boundaries start to make sense, because now they are not reactions, they are alignments. You respond less, you initiate less, you engage without urgency, not to punish, not to provoke, but because your emotional economy has changed. Here is the Stoic principle to hold. You detach not by cutting people off, but by cutting unnecessary emotional spending. When you stop over-investing internally, external distance becomes natural, effortless, and most importantly, clean. No resentment, no games, no collapse, just clarity. 4. Silence is the first boundary. Most people think boundaries begin with explanations. I need space. This is too much for me. I'm trying to detach. Stoicism does not rely on announcements, because announcements invite negotiation. Silence is the first real boundary. Not hostile silence, not passive-aggressive withdrawal, but the absence of emotional reaction. When you are attached, you respond quickly. You explain yourself. You ask questions. You seek reassurance. Silence interrupts that pattern. Stoic silence is not meant to punish the other person. It is meant to protect your inner state. You stop reacting emotionally. You stop asking follow-up questions. You stop filling gaps with meaning. And something important happens. The dynamic changes. When you are silent, the other person is no longer managing your emotions. They are left with their own behavior. This is why silence feels uncomfortable at first, because it removes the illusion of control. Attachment often hides inside the belief that if I respond correctly, things will stabilize. Silence breaks that belief. It says, I am no longer organizing my inner world around this interaction. Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that the more you explain yourself, the more invested you appear, and investment signals vulnerability. Silence does the opposite. It creates space, and space creates information. Watch what happens when you stop reacting. Do they push harder, demand clarity, accuse you of changing, suddenly become warmer, disappear entirely? None of these outcomes are problems. They are data. Stoicism values data over drama. Silence allows behavior to reveal itself without interference. This is why Stoic silence is calm, not cold. You remain polite. You remain composed. You simply do not offer emotional access. No justifications, no emotional explanations, no attempts to manage perception. This is difficult because the mind wants resolution. It wants to close loops. It wants certainty. Stoicism teaches you to tolerate open loops because clarity comes from observation, not control. Here is a practical Stoic rule. Do not respond from emotion. Respond only from alignment, or not at all. If a response is not necessary, silence is the cleaner option. Over time, this silence does something powerful. Your nervous system calms, your thoughts slow, your emotional reactions weaken, not because you forced them down, but because you stopped feeding them. Remember this. Silence is not absence, it is restraint. And restraint is where detachment begins to take shape. 5. Detach from outcome, not from your values. One of the biggest fears people have about emotional detachment is that they will become cold, indifferent, or morally worse. Stoicism rejects that fear. Detachment is not about abandoning your values. It is about abandoning expectations you cannot control. Most suffering in attachment comes from outcome dependence. You behave well, but secretly hope for a specific response. You stay respectful, but wait for appreciation. You remain available, but expect reciprocity. That hidden expectation is the hook. Stoicism cuts the hook cleanly. It teaches you to act according to your principles, without tying your emotional state to the result. This distinction is essential. You do not detach by becoming careless. You detach by becoming consistent. Consistent in how you speak. Consistent in how you treat others. Consistent in how you respect yourself. But inconsistent in one crucial area. You stop needing a particular outcome to feel at peace. This is difficult because the mind wants guarantees. It wants reassurance that your effort will be noticed, your restraint will be rewarded, your absence will be felt. Stoicism offers none of that. Instead, it offers something stronger, integrity without attachment. You do what is right because it is right, not because it secures a response. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that other people's actions are not his responsibility. Only his own character was. That mindset changes how detachment feels. You are no longer withdrawing in bitterness. You're standing firmly in alignment. Here is how this looks in practice. You remain polite, but you stop hoping. You remain calm, but you stop waiting. You remain respectful, but you stop explaining, not to punish, not to test, but because your inner balance no longer depends on reaction. This removes emotional bargaining. You no longer ask, if I do this, will they finally change? You ask, is this consistent with who I choose to be? That question restores power. Stoic detachment is not emotional shutdown, it is emotional non-dependence. You allow yourself to feel disappointment without demanding repair. You allow sadness without turning it into pursuit. You allow care without turning it into self-abandonment. Here is the Stoic principle that defines this part. I act according to my values. Outcomes are not mine. Once you accept this fully, something shifts. You stop chasing signals. You stop reading into silence. You stop investing energy where it is not returned. Not angrily, not dramatically, naturally. Detachment becomes clean when values remain intact and expectations are released. That is Stoic clarity. 6. Rebuild your identity. Outside the attachment. One reason. Emotional detachment feels so difficult is because attachment slowly reshapes identity. You don't just miss the person, you lose the version of yourself that existed around them. Your routines shift, your priorities bend, your sense of direction becomes entangled with their presence. Stoicism recognizes this danger early. When your identity depends on another person, detachment feels like losing yourself. That is why many people return to unhealthy attachments. Not because the relationship was good, but because the emptiness afterward feels unbearable. Stoic detachment addresses this directly. You do not detach by removing someone from your life. You detach by reclaiming who you are without them. Attachment weakens when identity strengthens. Ask yourself honestly, who were you before this attachment took center stage? What disciplines did you maintain? What standards did you protect? What pursuits absorbed your attention? Attachment narrows identity. Stoicism expands it. The Stoics believed that a person anchored in purpose is far harder to destabilize emotionally. When your sense of self is rooted in personal discipline, daily structure, values practiced consistently, effort directed inward, no single relationship can dominate your inner world. This is why Stoicism emphasizes routine, not as distraction, but as grounding. You rebuild identity through action, not reflection alone. Small, consistent acts matter more than insight. You begin by reclaiming space that attachment occupied. Time once spent thinking about them, energy once spent monitoring reactions, emotional bandwidth once spent waiting, you redirect that space deliberately. Physical training, focused work, quiet study, intentional solitude, not to numb yourself, but to re-anchor. Stoicism teaches that identity is not discovered. It is constructed through repeated choices. Each day you act in alignment with your values, your identity stabilizes. And as identity stabilizes, attachment loosens. You no longer ask, how do they see me? You begin asking, am I living according to my standards? That shift is subtle, but decisive. Here is a Stoic rule to apply immediately. Do at least one thing each day that has nothing to do with the person you are detaching from. One act that reinforces self-reliance. One action that affirms independence. Over time, these actions accumulate. You stop orbiting someone else's gravity. You become centered in your own. Detachment then stops feeling like loss. It starts feeling like return. Return to agency. Return to clarity. Return to yourself. 7. Accept that detachment feels like loss. This is the part most people try to avoid. Because emotional detachment does not feel empowering at first. It feels empty, unsettling, like something familiar has been taken away. Stoicism does not lie about this. Detachment feels like loss because, in a sense, it is. You are losing a source of emotional stimulation, a familiar pattern of thinking and identity shaped around attachment, and the mind resists loss instinctively. This is why many people relapse into attachment, not because the relationship was healthy, but because the discomfort of detachment feels worse than the pain of staying attached. Stoicism reframes this completely. It teaches that pain does not automatically mean something is wrong. Sometimes pain means something unhealthy is being removed. Think of attachment as emotional dependency. When dependency is interrupted, the system reacts. You feel restlessness. You feel emptiness. You feel the urge to reach back. These are not signs of failure. They are signs of withdrawal. Stoics understood this pattern. They knew that when you stop feeding a habit, especially an emotional one, the mind protests. That protest is temporary, but only if you do not interpret it as a mistake. Most people make this error. They feel the discomfort and conclude, this detachment isn't working. So they reach out. They re-engage. They reset the cycle. Stoicism teaches a harder response. Discomfort is not a command. You do not need to fix it. You do not need to escape it. You need to endure it. Here is the key, Stoic insight. If detachment hurts, it means the attachment was real. And that is precisely why detachment is necessary. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming independent. Loss is the cost of freedom. Not permanent loss, but the loss of illusion. The illusion that someone else was responsible for your inner stability. Stoics trained themselves to sit with emptiness without rushing to fill it. Because emptiness is a transition state. It is space being created. And space is where clarity enters. Here is a principle to hold during this phase. Do not measure detachment by how good you feel today. Measure it by how little you abandon yourself. Some days will feel quiet. Some days will feel heavy. Some days will feel neutral. All of that is normal. What matters is that you do not undo your discipline to escape temporary discomfort. Over time, something shifts. The emptiness becomes calm. The urge weakens. The emotional pull loses urgency. And one day you realize you're no longer fighting detachment. You are living inside it, not numb, not bitter, free. Detachment is not coldness. It's clarity. Let's bring everything together. Emotional detachment in Stoicism is not about becoming distant or unfeeling. It's about becoming uncontrolled by attachment. You learned that attachment is not love, it's expectation. You learned that emotions don't need to be negotiated. They need to be observed. You learned that attachment begins internally, before any external distance is created. You learned that silence is a boundary, that values matter more than outcomes, that identity must exist outside any single relationship. And finally, you learned that detachment feels like loss, because freedom always costs something. Stoicism does not promise comfort. It promises clarity. Clarity about what you control. Clarity about what you don't. Clarity about where your energy belongs. You don't emotionally detach to punish someone. You detach to stop punishing yourself. You detach so your peace is no longer negotiated. So your mood is no longer reactive. So your inner world is no longer held hostage by hope, fear, or longing. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. And there is a profound difference. Caring with attachment is anxious. Caring without attachment is calm. One enslaves you, the other frees you. If you are practicing this right now, remember, you're not weak because it hurts. You're not failing because it feels empty. You're not wrong because you missed them. You're restructuring your inner life. That takes time. That takes patience. That takes discipline. But every day you do not abandon yourself. You are making progress, even if it doesn't feel dramatic. Leave this video with one stoic commitment. I feel deeply, but I remain free. Not because you shut your heart down, but because you refuse to let attachment rule it. If this helped you, support the channel by liking and subscribing. And remember, detachment is not the absence of emotion. It is the presence of self-control. That is Stoic freedom.